So we're going to talk about strategies for vocabulary development and instruction, and then writing scientific instruction. So I want to start out, if you pass those out, when you come into my mathematics classroom, I teach 6th grade math, and my students are given a warm-up. And usually we give them 3 to 5 minutes to solve this warm-up. I'm going to give you all about a minute to read this problem and come up with the solution. And remember, we have strategies. You can circle our keywords, you can circle the numbers, you can circle our units, and everything should be there for you to be able to solve.
So I also teach math study skills as well in our school. We want to develop the portion that are weak in our students. So in the mornings, the first classroom time we take is for students to develop those math skills and find that this is also a very important exercise for them as well. So you probably have about 45 seconds left.
This is all stuff you should know. This is the 6th grade math standard. You should know how to solve this problem. And we have a picture up here to maybe help you solve this problem as well.
30 seconds.
Come on, we need answers. We need answers. All right, that should be enough time for you to solve this. How many of you have trouble solving this problem? How many of you are fluent in Swedish? You are. Well, this is actually written in Swedish. And if you look at this picture here, I teach in an urban school in Atlanta, Georgia. Our picnics don't look like this. The people that go on picnics don't look like this, okay? And so one thing that when I show this to my students, they can't relate to this picture. Okay, this is a very difficult picture for them to relate to. But then they start reading the problems. I can pick out a few words. I understand what brownies are, so if you hear something about brownies. Picnic. Sounds like a picnic. Maybe the picture would help them with that. Then everything else is a jumble of words. And what I discovered that in my 6th grade middle school math classroom, this is what a lot of my students see when they get the warm-up. It's not written in Swedish, it's written in English, but this may be what they see because of their literacy background. So when I think about what it takes to be successful in a mathematics classroom, it's kind of overwhelming for a student to come in to solve a real-world problem. And our real-world problems are always written as word problems. Okay? First, they have to be able to read the word problem. A lot of us have difficulty even reading that word problem. Then they have to understand the premise. So they have to be able to take what they read and then understand what is it even talking about. Okay? Well, it's talking about going on a picnic, and there's brownies, and we have to have flour to make the brownies. Okay? If you can't hear me, raise your hand, and I'll make it louder over that.
Can't hear.
Okay? Once they understand the premise, they have to figure out what is the mathematical operation they need to solve. I have to think back to everything that I've learned in math. What of those techniques can I apply to solve that overall premise? And then they have to solve the problem with accuracy. They have to be able to carry out the procedure. And then they have to explain and interpret the results both orally and in written form. That's a lot for an 11-year-old to have to think through to solve a problem in 3 to 5 minutes, especially if they can't read the question. So when I was ready to go in the classroom, I thought I had the tools I needed to go in. One of the things we use in math is the cubes method, where we teach the students to circle in the key numbers and units, to underline the question so they can actually understand what they're trying to answer, and then box in the keywords. When I started using this in my classroom, I had students that would box in the word D or up, thinking that was a keyword to help them solve the problem. In reality, like, more than, we need something to let them know the operation they're going to use. And so what I discovered is that our cues method was not enough. So what I encountered in my classroom was that most of my students were 2 or more grade levels behind me. So I had a lot of students in my 6th grade class who were reading on the 1st grade level, 2nd grade level, 3rd grade level. Half of my students' home language was not English. So they were coming into my classroom, they could speak English 18 hours, they speak another language 18 hours a day, and they speak English 6 hours. And they were struggling with the English. And then a significant number of my students had been in the U.S. for less than 6 months. And they had 0 English students. And so that was a challenge. The Q's method doesn't really work if you can't read the problems and identify the right words. And so what I want to share now is our tests. So I'm lucky enough to be an accountant where we have to give the same unit test across every student level. Okay? And this is, I pulled actual questions from the 6th grade unit test. What do you notice about this question? It's a lot of words. It's a lot of words. It's a lot of words that our students may not know how to read. So I would have a lot of students that would look at this and just pick an answer. Because it's a lot to read. If you look at A, it's talking about a pattern with fabric. How many of our students know what a pattern is? Maybe even what fabric is. You know, use that terminology. I knew that because I remember my grandmother going back a long time ago buying patterns at the store and buying fabric. But do our students have that same experience today? Okay? So all of this, they have to be able to read, in each one of these scenarios, interpret what type of math problem goes with each one to be even able to identify what that is right there. That was a big challenge for my students. What I ended up doing, and it's just out of necessity, is I had to modify the test. If the county knew I was doing that, they probably wouldn't like it, but I wanted my students to feel successful. I wanted them to have a fighting chance on these tests. So one of the things I did was simplify the language and make it more relevant. So this is the problem on the test, and this is how I tried to simplify it. Okay, instead of an amusement park, we have a Six Flags in our area. So our student can relate to Six Flags, they know Six Flags. Okay? I try to take out all these words that really don't add to the situation. Okay? This is pretty redundant, so I took that out. And the question I got the most, before I did this, the question I got the most was this last part. Explain what this value means in terms of the context of Stephanie's visit to the amusement park. My students were like, Mr. Grisgby, what is that? What do they want us to do? They didn't even know what the question was asking, and I don't blame them. And so I just changed it to explain what your answer means. That they can get. Okay? Another thing I did was eliminate extraneous words. So this problem was very frustrating to me. Because all this problem is trying to determine is if they know what a coefficient is, if they know what a variable is, and they know what a constant is. They have this whole paragraph about an assignment for Myra that has nothing to do with what they're trying to be evaluated on. So I had students reading that paragraph, trying to figure out what that paragraph is, spending a lot of time trying to understand what's going on there. And then they get to the two expressions, and really all they have to identify are the coefficients, constants, and variables. So I took that whole paragraph out for them. It's not needed, it's not what I'm trying to test. Then, down here, the question gets even more confusing. It says expression A has more than B, expression A has more terms than expression B. Then they flip it. Expression B has less coefficients than expression A. Then they flip it again. Expression B has more constants. It's all this flipping and confusion where you almost have to have a diagram to figure out, okay, am I asking for less than, more than, whatever. So I tried to make them all a little more consistent, but they have at least a fighting chance. I'm not trying to evaluate whether they understand the reading. I'm trying to evaluate they know the terms that we're trying to do. Then I realized I had to bring in items to help. I was kind of surprised, I was naive, I was surprised when I said, how many bottles of water in a 12-pack? I got 6, I got 8, I got 12, I got 14. That was, I thought was a simple question, but if they're not going to the grocery store paying attention to what's going on in the grocery store, that's not obvious to an 11 or 12-year-old, okay? So I would bring in bottles of water. This is what a 12-pack is. How many bottles are in that 12-pack? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. How many bottles are in the 6-pack? So they couldn't even begin to solve this problem, this unit rate problem, if they didn't even know how many bottles we're talking about. So we have 3 12-packs. They had to figure out that that's 36 bottles of water. 1 12-pack is 12. 4 6-packs are 24. That was just too many steps, and they were not able to visualize what was going on there. And then finally, what I did for my multi-language learners is I tried to write the questions in their first language. I don't speak all the languages in my classroom. I have Google Translate, and to me, that's better than nothing. And so I tried to do this so they would have a chance. The other thing I did here, this is Google Slides, and maybe I'm using Google Slides, but what I do in PowerPoint is I always have PowerPoint going on in the background on my board, and I use the translate option. So I always have Spanish subtitles in my room, and I'm lucky enough that most of my multi-language learners speak Spanish, so I'm able to get by with that. If you have multiple languages in your classroom, that may be a little more difficult. But I try to have that translation up there so that they really can at least read what we're talking about, because I have a lot of students that do not speak English, but as we translate, they know the math. They may have learned it differently, they may have used different methods to do it, but they know the math. And I'm interested in them knowing the math. So I'm trying to give them as many tools as I can to be able to help them learn the math, help them demonstrate to me that they know the math, etc. So that's the other thing that I try to do. So that's what I try to do in my mathematics classroom. It's something I'm still trying to get better at every day, but that's where I'm headed in my class. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Spencer.
Thank you, Jared. So we want to talk about now success in the middle school science classroom and how that looked for me. What I use is applying real world phenomenon so that the students can connect to the science that I'm teaching. I teach earth science in 6th grade level. The first thing is that we use an opening that would show them how it relates to the standard. And so we're talking about maybe a phenomenon that is a tornado, a hurricane, or some type of event. Students really love the disaster factor in that. So I learned that it was very interesting for them to see what really happens. So the goal is to improve literacy for those students, so allowing them to read and connect so that they can improve the science learning. We want to connect that definitely to the Georgia Standard, which I place on the board each day, so that they can see, what we're learning and what their success would be connected to. And we want to understand how the connection to earth science and why it's important. Many of the students really don't like science or very much not interested. And so I have to show them why science is important, first of all, and then how it affects you if you don't understand what's going on. And then I'll show you some examples of how we, in written form, got them to learn more literacy and explain what they learned in that stage. So in my urban middle school classroom, have a lot of different scenarios and challenges because I teach students with disabilities. And 95% of the students read lower than the 6th grade level. Then we have 40% of the students that have disabilities, that are on IEPs, that need special assistance, and they're in co-taught situations in their ELA classrooms, which means that they have to have a second teacher there to help them to understand what's going on. And we work together to build the students' reading abilities, and many of them are actually pulled during testing time that's one thing that's really caused a lot of challenges. And I've, learned to overcome that as well, because they need to be tested in small group settings. So therefore, they're not in with the regular group of students while we're even doing the testing. We also have to monitor the students who aren't performing and putting in place many different supports for them. And I'm gonna show you some of the supports that I use as a whole class to get the students' literacy improved. First thing is how I capture the attention at the beginning of the unit, right? So, as you all might remember, there was an earthquake in Turkey. It was on the news. So I like to make this culturally relevant for the student. So cultural relevance is what's happening now. Does it connect to me? How can I get them to understand it and cause a greater impact? So first of all, instead of calling it a bell ringer, which most of the kids act like after 2 months, they don't know what that means. Because the bell had already rung, so it didn't ring again to make us sit down. It rang before we left the class. So I said, well, when you say Google it, well, we don't have Google because they banned it in our school district. So I said, well, what are we gonna do? Search it up. So we changed it and I asked them what they like. So we called it Search It Up and Jot It Down. So that means you needed to research it and then write about it or learn about, tell the rest of the class about it. So these would be some of the questions that I would ask about the tectonic plate movement or why this happened, and connected it to the standard that relates to that. So I'm gonna show you all a quick video, and it is sensitive.
The best way to
and I also speak on that to the students who might be sensitive in the room, and I tell them, I walk them through the fact that the child is gonna be okay. But they put a warning on this video right now, but we'll just watch like maybe 30 seconds to a minute of it. I want you to tell me how you feel after this, and what you might want to know and learn when it comes to earth science. So raise your hand and tell me how you felt when you saw that the baby, what was happening on that video. Yes, sir.
Emotionally connected.
Very good. Yes, sir.
I wanted to learn how strong the earthquake was.
Very good. So we want data and detail. I like that. And we're also connected to the outcomes and how I can protect myself from this trauma happening to me and my family. Very good. So then we will have the students write down what they learned. So after they search up what happened in the earthquake, we're shifting now to the minerals and the rocks. So this would be what I would write down the question on the board with a bell ringer, or search it up and jot it down. And so they could tell me the difference between a rock and a mineral. Because these are questions that I know that are important to our assessment. So I had to find a way to get the kids to dig deeper into their knowledge on these, as opposed to just the surface learning, and then to make them give a repeated way of having them read on the subject and then write, which is improving our literacy. And then you can see some of the various examples of how different students will go more into depth of what they're actually learning. This really worked well. We also have other systems in our school district that are adaptive learning. We have Freckle Science and also News ELA. So it allows me to give the students reading on any particular subject that will adapt to their level of reading ability. So reading ability of second grade, I have some students who read on second grade level. The article will be more simplistic, and then the other students will have longer, more in-depth articles if they have a Lexile score that is at a higher level. So I found that very effective. And then
Also, News ELA does the exact same thing, something very similar. So maybe you can use those in your school district. Brain Pop, one of my favorite ways to start out the unit, because it gives a great video for students who are more audio, and you can also put on the closed caption, just like Jared did with the Brain Pop video. That gives them ability to read it as well as hear it and learn it and to repeat it. I like to use the questions as a quiz right afterwards. There is a challenge that is a card sort. That actually is a great way of completing vocabulary. And then there's the related reading, and I have that circle here. If you can see it, it's a related reading. So there's various articles that connect into the Brain Pop with the subject. So we have that with the volcanoes. Pop-up reading, another great literacy strategy for my students. They love technology and you know it, right? So they will grab your microphone and steal it and want to speak into it. So in order to increase participation, I allow them to read from the screen using the microphone, and then it actually encourages the other students to do it. What I found was that the students that were shy but wanted to read, the students then started to encourage them and tell me, you know, Becky wants to read, or they want to read, and so I would go over and stand next to them so that they won't feel like they will miss some words, and if there was a vocabulary word they didn't know, I would whisper it to them. So then in the microphone, they sound like they knew what they were doing. That was a great way to build confidence in learning science as well. It reinforced all of the confidence and build courage for the students. So confidence is a big portion of learning the science for me. Basically with the students, I want them to know that they know the answers really well. So we encourage them along the way. Here is one of our questions from our assessment in science, okay? So we want to simplify it, and then I'll make it culturally relevant. You can use these as closings as well. So here's a question. A student wants to investigate the luster of different minerals. The table below describes different types of luster, right? So we have this big table, which can be quite, scary to someone who's reading on a second or third grade level, and they're in the 6th grade. The student has several mineral samples. How can the student investigate the luster of minerals? Now, I always give them hints and tips, and I say, read the question first. Before you read all that, or read any of that, just read the question first. How can the student investigate the luster of the minerals? That simplifies it for them, and is a great strategy. And then, so that's how I simplify that concept after we've written charts and different various things. And then I want to make this culturally relevant. So I'm going to ask you all, do you know how to investigate the luster of minerals?
Scratch test.
Scratch test. That is one way to investigate a mineral, but not the luster.
Look at it under the sun. Yeah, under the light.
Look at it under the sun, under the light. That's excellent. That is true. So I'm going to show you how I would get the students to. All right. So, since we don't have my cell phone, what we're gonna do is I had made up a song. There's some music I want you to know. I didn't make up the song, but I kind of made up the words to the song. But there's a song that says, "Turn your lights on." Hey, turn your lights on. So I would say to the kids, "Shine a light on it." Hey, shine a light on it. Hey, so he's got his flashlight out. That's excellent. But I just play a little music, do a little dance, because that connects to our students, right? They like the music, and then everybody, anytime I would say, "How do we investigate luster?" everybody would go, "Shine a light on it." Hey, and then there's the answer. And then this is how we investigate the mineral's luster. I also create a study guide that breaks down the questions and the answers that they need to know. And this is just a small sample of what a study guide would look like for the students. So now we're going to introduce Ms. Tina Tyler. She's going to talk about how we, bring this in as pre-service professionals into the Noyce, as Noyce Fellows.
So as Noyce Fellows, when we started together, Georgia State, we had tasks that we had to complete as we were going through our coursework and, becoming certified educators. So the first was our community asset mapping project, which, afforded us an opportunity during COVID, to virtually seek out what resources were available in the respective districts where we taught. It helped our new teachers to better understand the communities where they will be serving. If they were new to the city or new to the community, it helped them to navigate those spaces, but also it gave you like a preface to what your students had access to in the classroom. From a virtual, because we all started pretty much during COVID or right at the cusp of COVID, we also became very familiar with how to access things virtually. And a lot of us became more comfortable with technology because of that. And so even as we're coming through this, that called post-pandemic era, we can still refer back to those resources, to support our students at home. Action research, all of us were tasked to identify issues, not too big, even though we all, I think at our core, want to save the world. But something that we could actually, where we could, compel change in the classroom. It could be an issue, it could be something that was just nuanced with our pedagogy. And then finally, our HEAL pedagogy framework and using the historically responsive literacy framework to inform our lesson planning and for some of us, our instruction. So the word culture can become diluted to a certain extent because everyone wants to use it like other terms that we may hear very often. But I think using those two frameworks with our lesson planning and for our instruction, it helped us to better understand how we could meet the needs of our students, unpack our biases before we go into the classroom, and to better understand the times that we're kind of flowing into now, where we're having to manage the possibility of being censored, but still knowing that our students want to know the whys because we're STEM educators. They want to know the whys, they want to make the connections so that they can have their own understanding, which